India very nearly lost the Asiatic because you cannot outrun wildlife in wild habitats. Where is the Sardarji? The lions were independent India's first national animal. Oh, before that, there's a Google. And he kept saying, Ladiki Lao. Well, in an ideal world, I should not be king. It happened in India in 2018. And lions were killing people, lions were eating people. We are sitting on a ticking time bomb. Luckily, we downloaded it because after that, it's been scrubbed away from the internet. Lions have to be translocated in letter and spirit within 6 months. These lions they don't need an Aadhaar card to get into gear, right? 1,500 or more families have sacrificed significantly by relocating. Man is that end of story. He meant business.
Walking into an unknown forest and making eye contact with a fully grown lion is what a young Ravi Chellam did in the 1980s. Ravi Chellam is India's premier expert on Asiatic lions and he's made the protection of these cats his life's goal. He's been studying these cats for over 40 years. He's a professor, a scientist, and a filter coffee-loving conservation crusader. He is Dr. Ravi Chellam.
Thank you, Ravi, to come to our podcast. And as you know, our podcast is called Some Like It Wild. We are looking for people who are really, really wild. You're one of them. So that's the reason you're here.
I like that introduction. Very welcoming.
Okay, so why did you choose lions to do your research?
I think a more fundamental question, given the time I was growing up in the late 70s, getting out of school and college, is why wildlife?
Why wildlife? Yeah, that's a much bigger question.
I did not grow up thinking that, or even knowing that there was a career in wildlife research, wildlife conservation. And in many ways, my introduction, even you could call it inspiration for wildlife, was reading Tarzan and Phantom comics. As stupid as it might sound. And also expectation in the 60s, 70s for a middle class family was you would take a career which would have good future prospects. And these careers you could count on the fingers of one hand. You were either an engineer or a doctor or an accountant or a lawyer at best.
I think before we talk about the BSc, and let's go back to the childhood part of it. Where were you born?
I was born in a small town called Podanur.
Okay.
This is in between Coimbatore and Palghat on the border of the Tamil Nadu Kerala border.
And then you moved to Chennai.
In 65, I think I moved to Madras. And then I started regular school.
You had amazing teachers in your school at that time.
No, Vidyamadhur, it was not a big school. It was not, we had playgrounds. It was a crowded playground, but it was also a playground which had trees. So we spent a lot of time climbing trees, watching trees. We had classes underneath trees. So there would be an English teacher who would say, look at this tree and write an essay, or, allowing you to engage with nature, allowing you to imagine things. And those were really crucial for me as growing up. And there is this case where Mr. Srinivasan, R. Srinivasan, was teaching us geography. And hurricane cyclones were part of the syllabus. And it so happened that during that time, we were in school and the cyclone was about to cross the coast. He actually took us to the coast to watch the cyclone come home. So that is, again, remarkable that it wasn't seen as dangerous, or it was not, you didn't want to hunker down. You want to go and experience real life.
If I have to say that between nature or profession which you chose and cricket, which was your first love?
Well, I don't know whether... which was the first love? That should be the name of a girl. I'm not going to reveal that here. But in chronological order, cricket clearly was my first passion. I don't play it anymore, but cricket is definitely a far earlier passion than wildlife. I had to make a choice, and this choice was sometime in the mid-80s, and I had to decide primarily between a job which was being offered to me based on my cricketing skills, or to go full-time academically into wildlife. And you know what choice I've made. So in some sense, that should also answer your question.
You did BSc in
Botany,
botany and MSc in?
wildlife biology.
And when did you decide that you actually want to do your PhD?
Point of trying to do an MSc to begin with was to do a PhD.
Oh, okay.
By then, I had reached, I would like to call it clarity in my mind that wildlife conservation is something I want to dedicate my life to. I want to be a professional wildlife conservationist.
Conservationist.
What is the route to take was not clear. There were not very many people to provide advice or set an example. And the resources available for us were also limited.
So between BSc and MSc, was it that you picked up a marketing job? Was it between BSc and MSc or it was after the MSc?
It was between BSc and MSc. I ran into a relative who was looking for their small business, somebody to work with them. Said, I'm interested. So he said, fine, file a formal application, come for an interview. And I did that. And I got this marketing executive job selling industrial and textile chemicals, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And I also got a postgraduate diploma in marketing and sales management.
Oh, okay.
My parents were supportive. But at the end of the first year, they kind of literally told me, this is not acceptable. You can't stop with a BSc. At the very minimum, an MSc is required. December of 82, a camp was in Point Kellyman. BNHS had a ringing camp there. And so as the part of the preparatory party, we typically go 1 or 2 days before the camp starts, and we were kind of doing the setup. As we were scoping out the space to figure out what trails we should take, I saw 3 people with binoculars, with notebooks, collecting data. So I went up to them. I speak Tamil, so went and spoke to them and figured out they were master's students doing their dissertation in wildlife biology. I said, what? Yes, wildlife biology. So I said, where? Then they talked about AVC College. I had never heard about that college. They said Bharatidasan University. Unfortunately, I didn't even heard about the university. I got some details. Then went back and told my parents, I think I should explore doing this. They were, of course, delighted because that meant I was getting back to studying. And then I show up here. Distinctly remember, this is the biggest table I've seen in my life. There are about 15, 20 chairs facing, and there's only one person sitting across the table, which is the principal. So I said, good afternoon or good morning. There was a nod of the head, and instinctively my hand went to the chair because you expect to be asked to be seated. Luckily, I didn't pull the chair because there was no offer to be seated. Then began a series of questions which indicated trouble to me. They first said, why do you want to come from a city to a rural site? You have not studied for 2 years. Are you sure you can study now? You will be 2 years older than your classmates. How will you adjust? You have never stayed in a hostel. How will you adjust? And it went on and on like this. At the end of about 10, 12 minutes of this, I got pretty desperate and I said, sir, none of this is testing my knowledge or ability to do the course. Please focus on that. And if I'm not found fit, let's part ways. Okay. Name 5 wild animals of India was the question. I gave them scientific names. They said, go to counter number so-and-so, pay your fees. You
Awesome. So MSc happened. What next?
As I said, the MSc was always going to be a stepping stone for a PhD. Dr. Johnsingh's name was a recognized name for me through Hindu primarily. Almost every week, there would be some quote of Dr. Johnsingh. He said this, he did this. I had this vision of a fantastic guy, but the physical proportion was a portly Sardarji. Okay. Because it was John space Singh. Then BNHS centenary seminar happened in IIT Powai. I show up in Powai, IIT. And at the registration desk, a tall, lightly built, middle-aged man, dark-skinned, receding hairline with a backpack, jauntily walking. Hi, Ravi. I'm Johnsingh. I look at him and say, where is the Sardarji? There's no sign of a Sardarji here. And he starts speaking in Tamil. And his handshake, anybody is shook, Dr. John, it's a bone-breaking handshake. That's when I realized, he is from Tirunelveli district, he's a fellow Tamilian, and so on and so forth. So then I got my formal mentoring in wildlife science, in wildlife biology, in wildlife as a profession for the first time. And Dr. Johnsingh then helped me design my MSc dissertation project. I studied the ecology of common langurs in Mundandarai Plateau. And the unique thing there was a male Nilgiri langur resident with the common langur troop. And I even was able to record and photograph him mounting a common langur female. So this was about diet, ecology, ranging pattern, and so on and so forth. Dr. Johnsingh then was with BNHS. And in February 85, he joined the Wildlife Institute of India. That was the first wave of recruitment of non-forest service officers. WI was just coming up. They were still on hired space in the FRA campus. So in about June, he wrote to me and said, there's going to be an advertisement for research fellows. And I was quite clear and deliberate in choosing the Lion Project because my motivation to get into this field was to contribute to conservation. And to me, even in those early days, and I think definitely justified in the last 4 decades, the lions are far more endangered than, say, elephants. Smaller in numbers, single location, inbred population, and all of that. And I could, even in those early days, see a direct connect between the work that one would do and its practical implications.
Let's talk about your days in the Gir.
Oh, before that, there's a Google.
Awesome. Let's start.
No, I joined the institute. They say, get ready to go to Himachal Pradesh. But lions are in Gujarat. Why do you want me to go to Himachal Pradesh? No, not only Himachal Pradesh, also Jammu and Kashmir. I said, sir, what's happening? No, you should join a survey for snow leopards.
Oh.
So I said, that sounds exciting, but I come from a place called Madras, which is on the coast. I have never seen snow in my life. How do you expect? No, you'll do fine. And we very agreeably disagreed on that, but they allowed me to continue with life. So that took some time. So I joined 1st October till about late November. This discussion was going on. Then we got some exposure, field training, and so on. And I was sent in December to go and scope out gear and set up field base and things like that.
But tell me one thing, Ravi. You are from Madras. You didn't know Hindi. You are going to Gujarat, which is Gujarati as a language. Didn't you think that it's going to be really tough to do a research because you have to work with the local people who obviously do not speak in Tamil or in English or in Hindi, but Gujarati?
Fair question, but I did not look at it as difficulties. I looked it up as challenges.
Okay.
And challenges are meant to be encountered and engaged with. Grammar be damned. As long as you can communicate, I'm okay. And sign language, expression, whatever. I mean, you're not going to believe this. I have a colleague, again, Tamil speaking. He was sent to Kedarnath to do his field studies. And one day he was feeling cold. And he kept saying, Ladki lao. And his field assistants were aghast. He said, sir, are yaar, bahut thand lag raha hai, jalana hai, ladki lao. So I was doing better than that.
Amazing. So you landed up at Gir.
And I'm a junior research fellow on 800 rupees per month. And Gujarat, local forest officials, very welcoming, respectful, gave me a room to stay, assigned a local field assistant for me, allowed me to go in and things like that. But
you were allowed to walk inside the forest.
Absolutely. And there were pickups and drops when required. It was all of 4 days, if I remember correctly, December of 85. I see pug marks all over the place. Of course, my experience with large cats was limited. I had only seen one large cat before I went to Gir. So Gir was, in that sense, a complete change in terms of frequency of dealing with large cats. But in my first visit, I'm getting ahead of myself here. 4 days, walking, sleeping at night, in the forest, whatever, roars, tracks, cats, kill remains, but no lions.
No lion.
At the end of the 4th day, we were now walking back out of the
With
forest
the assistant.
with the assistant, who was only about 14, 15 years old. It's not some 35-year-old local village boy.
Got it.
And we'd gotten to know each other. We could communicate. I was getting frustrated, saying, boss, I'm supposed to study these animals. Yes, there's a lot of evidence, but I don't seem to see this animal. It's a large animal. It's a social cat. It can't be so difficult to see.
find one.
And about 4 kilometers from the exit gate, suddenly out of the bush, about 100 meters ahead of us, I heard some commotion and 4 lions came onto the road. And to frankly admit, I was scared because I hadn't seen large cats in that kind of proximity on foot.
4 lions. Your assistant.
My guide, field guide.
And what was
Field
the
guide
distance
and
between
with one stick.
With one stick.
Yeah.
That's it. On foot at the same level. And they
At the
were
same
about
level.
100 meters and
100
they were
meters?
clearly coming towards us. They didn't have any doubt about where they were going.
You were just there in the middle.
And I said, man, is that end of story? So I looked at him and his response was finger on the lips. Okay. Held my breath, finger on the lips, quiet. He kept coming. And this guy, quite relaxed, leaning on his little stick and observing. I'm still unsure. Lions kept coming. I keep turning. He's calm. He's not flustered at all. Then I realized I had binoculars, camera, all of that hanging from my neck, and I hadn't used any of that. By the time I focused and took the first shot, 3 of the lions had disappeared into the bush. But to me, in many sense, that retreating lion into the bush is a very, very fond memory. And I like to use it very often in my public talks and things like that, because that to me
Your first encounter.
is not only my first encounter, it kind of validated my choices of not just wildlife biology, but studying the lions and so on. And after that, I went to Gandhinagar to ask for permission and then came back in February and started field work. So when you are on foot in large cat territory, you are going to have encounters. And some of these encounters are planned. Some of these encounters are accidental from your point of view, accidental in the point of view of the animal. So there would be an element of surprise involved. So in total, I think I was charged about 25 times during the time. Once I had to run. Once we had to use some of us, 2-3 of us had to use our sticks to beat a lion off. But most of the time, it's really because no lion likes to be followed like that. And my job is to follow lions, right? And so that, you look at it this way, if somebody is tagging you all the time, you call it stalking.
You will get irritated.
Right? So I would put it like that. And no lion is asking you to also approach it closely. My job demanded I approach it closely because I needed to identify each of these animals and so on and so forth. So I never felt fear in that sense. And in fact, there was a important kind of a behavioral barrier I had to change in my field assistants. They were comfortable with lions, but they also knew how far they would go and how close, because you're only looking at lions thinking those are the lions.
Yeah.
But they can well be lions around you.
Yeah, which you have no idea about.
Okay, number one. Number two, the lion to begin with might feel like user-friendly, behaving well, but you don't know what's going through its mind, or a mosquito bites it, God knows what. It can just change. Or you suddenly cough or something. The whole equation can change.
Do they mock charge like elephants? Do they?
They do. And that's how I've survived, right? I mean, 23 out of 25 were more saying buzz off, enough is enough. Or I turned a riverbed, bend in the riverbed, and there was a lion sleeping, and they are startled, I'm startled. But the rule is stand your ground.
Don't run.
Don't run. Because you cannot.
Does it apply to all the cats?
I would say it applies to most wildlife. Sloth bear might be an exception.
Yeah, they are the
Sloth bear might be an exception, but because
otherwise
you cannot outrun wildlife in wild habitats.
it's better to stand
Because
your ground.
the minute you run,
Mm.
you don't know what is happening behind you.
They have no idea.
And the minute a thorn or a rock comes into play,
Yeah.
and the minute you lose height,
That's it.
Gone.
Game over.
so
The game is over.
the chances of you defending yourself, within quotes, defending not physically but behaviorally, is standing your ground. The other advice is never go alone. Always have at least one trained, experienced person with you. And if I'm looking through binoculars, if you're looking through camera, my field of vision is very different from reality. So that's the other thing that I had to train my field assistant saying, my job is to look at the lion, your job is to look after me, right? So the close approach was all a process of socializing them, letting them know it is safe. We are not here to disturb the animal, and so on and so forth. The one time I got charged was very early morning. It was not at full light. It was a radio-collared male. It was an eastern gear. And we'd been following him for some time, and he went off the road. So I really wanted to kind of follow. I did the mistake of going alone. As I said, it was still kind of twilight. It wasn't really light. And from about 30 meters, he turned, ears flat, did not even give a warning growl. He meant business. And I didn't make all of this out immediately. It took
Only in
me
retrospect, yeah.
in kind of 10 meters.
Yeah.
Then I realized, boss, there's something different.
Mm.
As luck would have it, I was on the base of a hill. That's the only time I ran. I ran up the hill because I didn't have much of a choice. And the lion came till the base of the hill and kind of looked up and seemed to convey saying, you've been following me through the night. Now allow me to go and sleep, or whatever the message was. But my colleague Jamal Khan got once treed. He had to climb an acacia nilotica tree, thorns be damned, because there was a male lion which came after him. So lions do attack people. It's not that they don't.
So Ravi, we've spoken about Asiatic lions. Can you tell us how tigers are different from lions in terms of how physically they're different, in terms of behavior? How are they different?
Both of them are large cats. And the big difference is, of course, that lions are the only truly social cat. At least in public perception, there's often the error made that lion societies are organized like human societies. There's a father, mother, children, happy family kind of stuff. But that's not true. A pride, by definition, is a bunch of related females with their dependent young. The male is not even integral to the pride. The male lives in groups, and they are called coalitions, male coalitions, which can range in size from 2 to 7. Why do they form coalitions? Like our political parties, numbers give them strength. Larger coalitions almost always are related males, because males have to disperse from the pride in which they are born. At the age of 3, mother, grandmother, aunt, everybody makes it very clear that the male is no longer welcome. And because females synchronize their mating so that they all give cubs more or less in the same period of time, because collective care then becomes possible. Those males, imagine 3 females are in a pride and they've all given birth, and there are 9 cubs or 10 cubs growing up, of which let's assume 50% is males, 50% is females. So these 5 males are ready to disperse. And they will all get the signal saying you're no longer welcome. But you can also have a scenario where there is only 1 male and the rest of the cubs are females. Even that lone male gets the same signal that you have to leave. Now, what chance does a single male have against 2 males, 3 males, 4 males? Much less. But there would be another lone male from some other territory who's also loafing around figuring out. Then they will meet and hopefully they will establish a coalition. So smaller coalitions tend to be unrelated males. Larger coalitions tend to be related males. So social structure is the most fundamental difference between tigers and lions.
Are tigers larger physically in terms of lions?
This is debatable because there is a range of sizes in tigers depending on the habitat they are in. Similarly, there is a range of, at least in African lions, there's quite a range in size, but they're comparable. big male lion would weigh about 200, 220 kilograms. It also depends on whether he's on a full stomach or an empty stomach.
Right. That's
Because they can
30 kilos, 40
gorge
kilos.
30 to 40 kilos of meat. So that can change the weight measurements quite big. But in terms of length, height, they look bigger because of the mane. The tiger obviously doesn't have a mane. It has a ruff, doesn't have a mane. But males and female adult tigers and lions are comparable in size. Lions, of course, are also sexually dimorphic in the sense males from a distance you can make out. There's no other cat you really can make out unless you're a bit of an expert. And of course, you need to look under the tail to figure out whether it's really a male or a female. And no wild cat is kind of showing you that unless you really make it a point to look for it. So social structure, appearance, and sexual dimorphism. That's what sets the lion and tiger separate.
What about African lions and Asiatic lions?
Lions evolved in Africa. So what we call Asiatic lions is actually an extraction of the African lion population. Not so recent now, but relatively recent genetic studies have clearly established there are only two lion subspecies, Panthera leo and Panthera leo melanocheetah. The East and South African lions belong to the melanocheetah subspecies. The West, Central African, and the Asiatic lion all belong to Panthera leo. When I studied, and for much after that, the Asian lion was called Panthera leo persica, but now genetic studies have said that it is really Panthera leo. The lions came to India through a process of natural dispersal over many thousands of years, and much of the Middle East, the Mesopotamian area, the Euphrates Tigris Valley were all lion strongholds. And the only reason this dramatic and drastic reduction in their distribution range and numbers is because of human beings. We have killed thousands of lions. And more recent research is also showing up how many lions have been killed in India. It's running, recorded, it runs into thousands. And clearly lions came much worse off than, say, tigers and leopards, simply because you see one lion, you see many lions. Lions can't keep quiet. They roar regularly. So if you don't see a lion, you hear a lion. So you can go on.
Locate.
And lions also tend to live in flatter and more open habitats, exposing themselves better. So the advent of the rifle, the firearm, really tilted the balance against the lions, because at that point of time, hunting, poaching was called sport. And even there was a bounty paid for killing lions by the government because it was seen as a predator of livestock and presenting danger for people.
So in India, lions were found in other parts of India also.
Absolutely. As far east as Bengal and reportedly even what is today Bangladesh. For long, I used to think Narmada was the southern boundary, but there is now some records of the lion having even lived just south of the Narmada. But the stronghold was western, northwestern, northern, central India. So the present-day states of Gujarat, Rajasthan, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and believe it or not, Delhi. Palam used to be the stronghold of lions. British soldiers on horseback have gone from Red Fort and hunted lions. And not so long ago, in the 1850s.
We know that Asiatic lions are only in one place, and we had a distribution of lions in many states earlier. And we end up losing in all those states, and now there's only one state which has got the Asiatic lions. I mean, how we end up losing lions from other states? Or
hunting.
Purely hunting?
Largely hunting, because by 1878-80, the last or 88, I think, the last lions outside of Gujarat are gone. And even in Gujarat, they were getting more and more restricted too. We very nearly lost the Asiatic lions. India very nearly lost the Asiatic lions. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, there are two reports which suggest the population was less than 12 or about 20. Now, even today, our population estimates leave a lot to be desired. We don't know the accuracy of those estimates. But I think it gives a good sense of the trajectory of the population, that it was really low. What helped was then Gir was in what was called as the Junagadh state, and the Nawab of Junagadh took it upon himself to provide the protection, even though some limited hunting was allowed, but a great deal of protection and care was given for the conservation of the lions. And that's
So
what.
he's the one who is responsible to some extent, or large
Yes,
extent.
Rasul Khan, if I remember the name correct, Rasul Khan ji. But there is also a story that one of the visiting viceroys, Lord Curzon, was offered the opportunity to hunt lions, and he's supposed to have advised the Nawab that we shouldn't be hunting, we should be protecting. I don't know whether this
true
is
or not,
truly
but yeah,
true,
yeah.
but it's often mentioned.
So you said it come down to less than like around 20 or something. So when a population, now it's again come back to about 700 or so. So when a population again re-emerges from that sort of small bottleneck genetic pool, what happens genetically to the population? Like when you bring it now to 700, how healthy is that population?
Two, three things happen. I'm now going back to 85 when I first saw the lion, and I last went to Gir in 2013. I've not had the opportunity to go for about 10, 11 years now. But through that time, I haven't seen, from a morphological, anatomical perspective, any compromise on any of those lines. These look like what lions are supposed to look like. They also are quite fecund. They breed very well. They produce litters. Litter survival is good. You don't see abnormalities in any high levels in cubs. Having said all of that, it is very clear when you compare the genetic diversity of the Gir population with other lion populations, this is the most inbred population.
Okay.
But it's remarkable that having gone through the genetic bottleneck, we don't see any manifestation. But it could be that they have compromised immunity levels. So if a disease outbreak strikes, it could prove to be quite detrimental to its survival.
So that's the thing. So what are, say, the disadvantages of having a small single population in one location, whether they don't exist anywhere else?
I often use the analogy of all your eggs in one basket. Whether you have 5 eggs, 50 eggs, 500 eggs, and let's say even 5,000 eggs, if the basket falls, what are the chances of at least some eggs surviving, right? The conservation of Asiatic lions is unfortunately a success, a grand success, which has gone unrecognized in India's conservation story. Let's not forget, the lions were independent India's first national animal. The tiger displaced the lion or replaced the lion, whichever way you want to look at it, in the early 70s, just when Project Tiger was going to be launched. The argument goes that the lion is restricted to one state, while the tiger is found much more widely across the country. Now, let's not get into the merit or demerits of all of that. But all I'm trying to say here is that from that close brush with extinction to have a situation where we have 700, most people say 800, maybe 900 lions, a population so large that the 1,500, 1,600 square kilometers of Gir forest, the Wildlife Sanctuary National Park, is not big enough to hold this population. According to all estimates, 50% of this population is in human-dominated habitats. So we have to salute, we have to recognize, we have to acknowledge that we have succeeded with lion conservation. But even success needs management, needs active management, especially in conservation. Because the unfortunate reality is, with conservation, you can never say you've succeeded. And that's the case with lions. But independent of the population number, and remember, I go back to the 80s on a recommendation of the National Board of Wildlife, commissioned by the Wildlife Institute of India, supported by the Ministry of Environment and Forest, Government of India, to study the ecology of the lions, behavior of the lions, social organization of the lions, so that we have real-time ecological information to inform what is called as a translocation program, which is take some lions, 5, 8, 10, 12 animals, release them in a suitable habitat far away from Gir to establish a second population in its former range so that you improve the conservation prospects. It's like buying life insurance. None of us buy life insurance thinking I'm going to die tomorrow. But what if?
What if?
That's exactly the motive, the logic, the conservation principle behind all of this.
Can you talk about the disease, especially that I think there was also an outbreak in Africa of canine distemper? How does it affect the animal and what happens?
Oh, it just kills them.
Huh?
Just kills them. It attacks their nervous system. It often comes in combination with an babesiosis disease.
What is that? What?
It's babesiosis is the name of the disease, and that seems to, in combination with canine distemper virus, really knock out. So we are now dealing with the Serengeti Mara population, which is 3,000 lions, the world's largest population of lions. In the early 90s, 94, if I remember correctly, there was an outbreak. 1,000 lions died in a matter of weeks. 33% of the population was knocked out. 75% of the population got infected. We don't have 1,000 lions. And we have been in denial saying, oh, Africa mein hota hai.
Has it happened in India?
It happened in India in 2018.
Oh.
And the joke is, the National Institute of Virology analyzed, found canine distemper virus. They put out the postmortem report. Luckily, we downloaded it because after that, it's been scrubbed away from the internet because nobody wants people to know that canine distemper virus operates in our population. How will it not operate? In India, dogs are everywhere.
Yeah.
Dogs don't get the required veterinary care. You can't blame the dogs for that. And dogs are feeding on carcasses. Lions are feeding on carcasses, especially outside. And as I said, 50% of the population is outside. And these lions they don't need an Aadhaar card to get into gear, right? So there is this flux of lions moving back and forth. With that comes disease and all kind of things. We are sitting on a ticking time bomb. 2018, as per official records, some say 30, 40, 60. But the government is admitted in assembly that in 5 years, they've lost 555 lions. In 3 years, they lost 330 lions. There are various estimates of lions. And a good percentage is going out through to disease. And I think that's an underestimate because not all dead lions are found. Not all postmortems are able to really get to the root of the matter to establish real cause. Sometimes you say heart attack. What does that mean? So what is the real cause? And disease is a real and present danger. And in the case of translocation, the Supreme Court has ordered way back in 2013 that lions needed to be translocated from Gir to Kuno in letter and spirit within 6 months. 15th April 2013, which meant by 14th of October 2013, the lions should have been moved. We are now in January 2025 and there is still no movement. Not only there is no movement, there's denial. People are saying in Gujarat, lions are finding their second home. The idea is to have geographical separation, geographical isolation.
Yes. And I'm pretty sure that conflict also would have increased drastically in like Gir or around areas. If the lions are out, if 50% of the population is out, conflict is bound to happen.
The
conflict. I'm talking about.
Much of India sees this in a very different way. Depending on, there is a gradation of people's response to large cat or dangerous wildlife presence in their lives. Because the default option in India is coexistence. Because whether you like it or not, you're living with wildlife. So you find your way, you have your adaptation. Fortunately, lions in general do not attack people to the extent you expect it to attack, given the frequency of lion-people interaction. So that works in the lion's favor. Having said that, between 1989 and 91 or 92, there was a bad drought. And a post-drought phenomena, lion attacks on people increased phenomenally. And lions were killing people, lions were eating people. And this, we from history can only find about 100 years before that, again as a post-drought phenomenon. But more recently, we are hearing more and more instances of people getting attacked by lions. Unfortunately, mainstream media is not picking it up and reporting. I have my network, so I'm getting information. But that's bound to happen. Road accidents happen. If you encounter, that's a risk that you run. But the translocation is not about lions being outside or to reduce conflict. As I earlier said, lions to enhance their conservation, to ensure that the success that we achieved over the last 100 years doesn't go down the chute.
So you were part of the committee which recommended the translocation to happen and also did a survey to figure out at which could be the right habitat for these lions. And then Kuno was decided. Why Kuno is so special?
The way we go about deciding on this is first try and find suitable sites within the former range of the animal. So we didn't go to Tamil Nadu or Kerala or Karnataka to look for lion sites. We wrote to forest departments which used to have lions several decades ago. And they gave us recommendations. And we had given certain criteria. Minimum 800 square kilometers of habitat, reasonable prey population, least amount of human disturbance and things like that. Kuno had positives. It was more than 800 square kilometers of forested habitat, more like 3,000, 4,000 square kilometers. The national park was small. Then we didn't even have a national park. We only had a wildlife sanctuary. It was smaller, but it was set in a larger habitat. It had the full suite of prey that you would want, cheetahs, sambar, nilgai, porcupine. You had all of that. But prey populations were down. There were quite a lot of village presence. And the last thing I wanted was suddenly a large carnivore coming, people who are not used to that large carnivore and kind of conflict. So, and this is pre-Forest Rights Act also. So we recommended that some 20 odd villages be relocated, a human-free habitat of about 800 square kilometers, which should be established as a national park, be set up, managed, prey base comes up, and then you bring the lion. So that's why Kuno was chosen.
So in Gir, there is any linear intrusion in terms of either the trains or the roads?
There is roads. There are railway tracks. There have been attempts to upgrade them, but so far, at least, people have been able to push back. But it's not just within Gir. We need to be careful about what's happening in the larger landscape also, because you can't have such a hard barrier between what is the protected area boundary and the non-protected area, and already with hundreds of lions outside.
So you have been associated or has worked with many organizations, which also includes the WII, A3, WCSI. Would like to know, why did you decide to go and why you decided to take up teaching as a profession?
So at the Wildlife Institute, your job included teaching. Wildlife Institute of India was from 1985 till 2006. The last 4 years of which was spent on deputation in the Biodiversity Division of the UNDP India office in Delhi. Around that time of finishing my tenure at UNDP, I got an opportunity to head A3 as director. So I resigned my position at Wildlife Institute to come and take up this leadership role. So this long tenure from 85 to 2006 at one institution with 4 years of deputation to the UN. And if you then look from 2006 to today, let's say 20 years, I've gone through many, many organizations, most of it in leadership roles. So I see my career in those two parts. One, really doing fundamental research, teaching, training, that kind of stuff, very detailed work. And then more in institution building, setting the agenda, policy engagement, more and more higher level public engagement. So the institutions, as I said, A3, Wildlife Conservation Society India Program, Madras Crocodile Bank Trust, Foundation for Ecological Security, Greenpeace India, and now since 2018, I'm with Metastring Foundation, and a year after that, I've been coordinating the work of the Biodiversity Collaborative. It's been a tremendously exciting journey. It has its ups and downs. It has had its pitfalls, setbacks, failures, but I don't think I would change anything.
It's time to bring the elephant in the room,
which is the cheetah. So, what is the history of cheetahs in India, Asiatic cheetahs?
Cheetahs were very widespread, almost as widespread as the leopard.
It was leopards.
Or even the tiger. I mean, definitely more widespread than the lions. Like the lions, the cheetahs evolved in Africa and through a process of natural dispersal came to India. As the lions got shot, cheetahs also got shot. But the big difference between lion cheetah or cheetah tiger or cheetah leopard is, in the hierarchy of large cats, cheetahs comes right at the bottom. So the cheetah has to exist in a lower density so that the chances of it encountering literally death is less. Plus, it's an animal which, unlike the other cats, is a courser when it comes to hunting. It needs to run long distances because it has the speed. So it also tends to occupy more open habitats. It's not that it cannot live in a forest, but a forest is a suboptimal habitat for cheetahs. So I was surprised. I mean, the last few years, I've been kind of delving into cheetahs to figure out that South India had populations of cheetahs, Karnataka had, Tamil Nadu had, even as far south as my native village in Tirunelveli, there are reports of cheetahs having been hunted there. We are now really dealing with the late 19th century, early 20th century. The last cheetah's public conception was that it was around independence time and it was declared 1952 as extinct. But more recent research suggests that well into the 60s, there were stragglers around the country. I think 64 or 65 is the last definitive record of a wild cheetah in India. So cheetah were very widespread.
And I think physically also they're very different from leopards, tigers, and lions because all the other cats are very heavy set, whereas cheetahs are fairly streamlined and lightweight, right? Like an average.
Because of the hunting technique that they adopt, right? The others are ambush predators, while this is a chasing predator.
And people used to keep them. I think that's very popular images of cheetahs are of them being used for hunting black buck during the British time. So was it that easy to tame the cheetah?
By behavior, it does seem that the cheetah is more amenable to be tamed. They were tamed in much greater numbers. The Mughal Emperor Jahangir is supposed to have had 1,000 cheetahs in his stables. So all of this has contributed to the extinction of the cheetah because you're capturing males and females from the population. You're not able to breed them in captivity. They have defined lifespans, which are probably shorter in captivity. They die. What do? You go out and capture more. So while it might not be such a great trophy animal like a lion or a leopard or a tiger, they were still shot. But the bigger problem was this mass capture and sustained capture going back to 1550. From about 1550, there are records of captive cheetahs. And the cheetahs, as you said, were used for coursing. They used to be blindfolded. They had a collar and a leash.
Like a falcon.
Or a pet dog, literally. Yeah. And then they would be taken out on a bullock cart or a motor vehicle more recently. And then once you see a herd of black buck or chinkara, you remove the blindfold, you remove the leash and let the cheetah go. And the cheetah will go and try to hunt. If it succeeds, it will not feed on the kill. It would be given a blood and some piece of the meat, but the carcass would go back with a hunting party to be cooked for themselves.
So this Project Cheetah, which we started in India, was it the recent phenomena or it was planned long time ago and got executed now?
There have been talks of bringing the cheetah back way back in the early 70s. The argument was that since independence, the only large mammal that India has lost was the cheetah, and it's our responsibility to bring it back. This is now Indira Gandhi being the prime minister, and there was official talks initiated with Iran, and Iran said, okay, we can consider, but we would like to have some lions. So the idea was some exchange program would be set up. We'll give some Asiatic lions and we'll get some Asiatic cheetahs. Then in the 80s, there was a plan mooted by the CCMB, Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology in Hyderabad, saying that if you give us some genetic material, we'll try and clone the Asiatic cheetah. But Iran refused, and I think rightfully so. I don't think we should get into that level of genetic engineering. And that story ended there. Then in 2009, Wildlife Trust of India, Wildlife Institute got together a bunch of cheetah biologists and held a meeting to consider the idea of bringing cheetahs back to India. Now, this was the time that the Supreme Court, in 2010, they produced a plan to bring cheetahs back. And the government of India issued an order and so on and so forth. This is the time that the Supreme Court, Forest Bench of the Supreme Court, was considering a public interest litigation, saying people have been relocated from Kuno. Government money has been spent on preparing Kuno for the lions. This recommendation was way back in 1995. Why haven't the lions been moved? April 2013, the judgment said lions are to be translocated in letter and spirit within 6 months. So that was to Kuno. And in that same judgment, the court said plan to bring African cheetahs to Kuno is illegal.
So the Supreme Court.
And the government's decision is quashed. That means it is nullified. You should not bring African cheetahs to India, to Kuno especially. In 2016, of course, Gujarat government immediately appealed. They had two kinds of appeals. Both appeals were dismissed. So today, the law of the land is lions should be translocated from Gir to Kuno. That's the law of the land. 2016, the National Tiger Conservation Authority went on appeal. It said, your 2013 judgment said, cheetah should not go to Kuno, but everybody understands it as cheetah should not come to India. Kindly clarify. We will not disturb Kuno. We will not take cheetahs to Kuno. Allow us to explore potential other habitats, including Satyamangalam in Tamil Nadu, for introduction of cheetahs. That case went through in 2020 January. The judgment came saying experimental introduction of African cheetahs in suitable habitats is allowed, is permitted. So that is where this recent push for cheetahs has come. As you know, in January 22, the action plan, Cheetah Action Plan was published. And in September of 22, the first batch of 8 Namibian cheetahs came. And in February of 2023, 12 more adults came from South Africa. So 20 adults have come from Africa till date. And all to Kuno.
Yeah. So a project like this, I think bringing animals all the way from Africa into India must be expensive. So what kind of money are we talking about in terms of relocation and keeping them alive?
The budget is a bit of a cloud. We really don't know the full detail. Various numbers are mentioned, but these are phenomenal numbers. These are unprecedented levels of investment in a single species.
So in your opinion, how are we doing now with regard to the cheetah introduction or reintroduction?
I'm seen as a critique of the project, but I'm very clear that the intentions of this so-called conservation initiative have never been honorable. It is only to continue to stall lion translocation. They appealed and said, we will not disturb Kuno. We will not, interfere with lion translocation. But where have they gone? Straight to Kuno.
To Kuno.
So that is in many ways even going against their commitment made to court. I'm all for cheetahs if we can do it properly. It is getting to be 24 months. It is already 24 months for the 8 Namibian cheetahs. It is getting to be 24 months for the 12 African cheetahs. And as on date, only 2 adult cheetahs are not in an enclosure. The remaining surviving, totally 12 adults are surviving. Cubs were born, of which 12 are surviving. 2 are outside, 10 adults and 12 cubs are all in captivity. They keep saying, oh no, it is free range. The biggest of the enclosures is 1.5 square kilometers. The smallest of it is 0.5 square kilometers. How can it be called free ranging? It's an animal which on an average home range is hundreds of square kilometers. So why are we trying to delude ourselves about this? Clearly, India does not have the space, the quality habitat for establishing a wild cheetah population. Let's get that right. Let's build the foundation first before bringing the cheetah. Because the intentions are not honorable, you rush the cheetahs in and we are paying the price for it.
So in an ideal world where Ravi Chellam is king, how would you go about, say, conserving the lions of India? And if you want to bring in cheetahs, how would you do that, in your opinion?
Well, in an ideal world, I should not be king. But to more seriously answer your question, wild cats need space. And conservation is not about really individual animals, which is not to say that we should neglect the welfare, but conservation is really about functional ecosystems, which means you're talking of fairly large expanses of area in which large cats population flourish, not just merely survive. And for all the reasons already mentioned, lion translocation is an absolute priority because otherwise the success that we have so hard fought, effort put in will go to nothing in literally a blink of the eye. So we need to be careful about that. And a lot of effort has gone in, a lot of thought has gone in, a lot of investment has gone in. And let's not forget, 1,500 or more families have sacrificed significantly by relocating. As far as the cheetah is concerned, I think we should try and bring the cheetah back, but we should do it very differently. Currently, there are no habitats for cheetah. So let's try and work to create the habitat. Instead of that, cheetah habitats are being turned over for large solar farms and windmills and so on and so forth. And we're being told the lie that the cheetah will come and not only save itself, its habitat, but also get Indian busted. So let's get real. Let's have open, honest conversations. Let all our conservation programs be transparent and accountable. Because people criticize something doesn't mean they mean ill. They're criticizing because they feel strongly about something. Hear them out, engage with them. So really, I would change the whole thing by investing first in lion translocation, simultaneously preparing the habitat, which means identifying, networking, creating corridors, managing not for 1 or 2 years, for decades, to prepare it with sufficient prey, then bring the cheetahs. Here today, we brought the cheetahs, and as recently as in September, we are being told a landscape for cheetahs is now being developed. So we put clearly the horse before the cart.
So in terms of this sort of disconnect that we have, you have sort of scientists who are on field, do the research, give out these recommendations, but then finally when policy comes, implementation of policy comes by the government, there's a disconnect. So why is that there, and how can that be addressed, especially since you're teaching and you always talk to new upcoming scientists and other managers of wildlife and things? Given that this is the reality of conservation, how do you equip them with skills or opinions?
First of all, learn to communicate. Learn to communicate in multiple formats, multiple languages. In India, you cannot survive and be effective if you only communicate in English. Communicate through all possible fora. Dinner party, lunch meeting, official meeting, interview request. The policy disconnect is simply because both at the governing level and at the executive bureaucracy level, it has become more important to figure out your careers and your re-election rather than be true to the purpose, to the role that you are playing. The way I engage with students is inform yourself. You have to know the best available information and learn to unlearn, because what you know today is going to change tomorrow. Don't be a prisoner of what you knew. So that is the first thing. Second, have the courage and conviction to respectfully communicate your opinions and accept when you are wrong. There is no shame in accepting that you are wrong. But not communicating, especially because of fear, is also not acceptable if you call yourself conservationist.
So how do you see, if you talk about every country is been doing their bit for the conservation, how India is fared?
Oh, remarkable. Hats off. I mean, all of us deserve more than a strong pat on our backs. It's a collective effort. Much as the government would like to think it was the government's effort, I don't think conservation can work merely by the government or merely by our protected area system. Not just lions, snow leopards, elephants, and smaller reptiles, birds, insects, plants. A vast array of species and populations of those species do not exist within our protected areas. Indian civilization, Indian belief systems, Indian philosophy has been so respectful and inclusive of nature and clearly putting people as part of nature rather than in some other superior form or, according us special privileges. I think that willy-nilly, either deliberately or otherwise, has seeped into all our lives, some more than the others. I see, unfortunately, a change from about the 1990s when we started the liberalization and things like that. And our development model has really become destruction of nature. And I think we need to be careful about the language here. Calling it development gives it a positive spin, while it really is impacting our own foundations of life. We are the largest human population today. We are amongst the densest human population today. We are also custodians to some remarkable biodiversity, functional ecosystems, large dangerous forms of wildlife, both in protected areas and also living with people or people living with these animals. And that has to be recognized, acknowledged, built upon, strengthened, rather than the official conservation policy saying people have to be relocated for wildlife to survive. There might be unique and few situations where that would be required, but we cannot really have the kind of thriving populations of wildlife we have today if we keep separating people from nature.
Awesome. This is so great. I think the clear message has been passed on, and we really thank you for coming to our podcast. It was lovely interacting, and I think it was very informative. Lots we could learn. We really hope that people also are able to get to know that what we can do to make sure that we are able to conserve what we have. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rohit.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much for
Shrikant.
coming.
It has also been an enjoyable experience reflecting back and connecting the dots in my own life.
Thank you again.
Thank you.